Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're gonna be diving into something that a lot of you have told us you find kind of tricky.
Yeah.
And that is how to improve your English fluency, even if you don't have like native speakers around to practice with.
Mm-hmm.
Now it can feel like a really big challenge, right?
Yeah.
But stick with us because it's totally possible.
Right.
We are exploring a guide today called How to Improve Fluency Without a Native Speaker, which I love. So we're going to be uncovering some really simple self-practice techniques that you can use. We're going to discover ways to find language partners, even if you don't have those native speakers. And we're also going to see how you can easily make English part of your daily life.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to dig into this.
Me too.
What's interesting about this guide, to me, is that it really focuses on building consistent habits.
Yeah.
And making English like a natural part of your routine rather than trying to become perfect like overnight.
Right. It's a journey, not a destination.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's like learning any new skill, really. You start small, you practice often, and you celebrate those little wins along the way. So let's jump into the first section of the guide, which is all about these self-practice techniques.
Okay.
And I think the first one might surprise you, talking to yourself,
Yeah.
but in English.
In English.
So have you ever done this?
I have. You know, it might seem a little strange at first,
Yeah.
but think of it this way. You're creating this safe space where you can practice without any pressure. The guide suggests, for example, just narrating your actions as you go about your day. For example, like while you're making coffee, you might say, I am adding sugar to my coffee.
I love that. So it's like giving yourself a little play-by-play of your life, but in English.
Exactly.
The guide also suggests describing your day.
Oh, yeah.
Like, today, I went to the park and saw a cute dog. Or even planning for tomorrow.
Right.
Like, tomorrow, I will go to the store to buy groceries.
Yes.
I mean, I feel like I do that in my head anyway.
Yeah.
Might as well do it out loud.
Exactly.
Ugly.
In English,
Right.
by speaking these thoughts out loud, you really get comfortable forming sentences and thinking in the language, which is a big step towards fluency.
Okay, so that's a really good one. Let's move on to another technique.
Okay.
This is called shadowing. Have you tried this one?
I have, yeah. It's a fantastic way to improve your pronunciation and also just to get a feel for the natural rhythm of English.
Totally.
Yeah.
I do this sometimes without even realizing it.
Yeah.
And I'll be watching something
Yeah.
and I'm like kind of repeating it. But the guide explains that shadowing involves listening to English audio and repeating it like an echo.
Right.
Try to copy the speaker's tone and speed as closely as possible.
Yeah.
And I think what's really great about shadowing
Yeah.
is that you can do it with anything that you already enjoy.
Exactly.
So you know your favorite YouTube channels, podcasts, TV shows, movies even. Just switch the audio to English, put on those English subtitles. I think it's a fun way to learn while you're relaxing.
It is.
I love it. Okay, the next self-practice tip is all about becoming your own English coach.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I love that. I think it's a great idea because often we don't hear our own mistakes or pauses until we listen back to a recording of ourselves.
Right.
So this is all about recording yourself speaking English.
Yeah, the guide suggests picking a topic that you're interested in and then just record yourself talking about it for a minute or two. Listen back, and you'll probably notice some things you could do better.
Yeah.
And then you can just try again focusing on those specific areas.
Exactly.
So it's like having your own personal language tutor right there with you. But then the guide also suggests, well, what if you want even more structured practice?
Yeah.
And that's where I think language learning apps can come in handy.
They can, yeah. They can help you practice vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation, all of that.
Yeah.
And they use AI and voice recognition to give you feedback on your English,
Oh, yes.
which I think is very cool.
It's like having these pocket-sized practice buddies.
Right.
And the guide actually recommends a few that I think are worth checking out.
Yeah.
Sipralik,
Okay.
which is for conversational skills.
Yeah.
Elsa Speak for pronunciation. And Lingby, which is really cool because it connects you with other language learners.
That's great. Yeah. And they offer structured lessons and interactive exercises, which can make learning a little more engaging and fun.
Yes.
So now I think it would be great to move on to vocabulary building because, I mean, A lot of people, when they think about learning a language, they think about,
Words.
they think about vocabulary, they think about, memorizing dictionaries.
Yeah.
But the guide really emphasizes that fluency isn't about memorizing every single word in the dictionary.
Yeah.
It's about learning how to use the words you already know in different situations.
Right. Well, that can feel really overwhelming
It can.
to try to memorize, an entire dictionary.
Right.
So what is the guide's approach?
Well, they suggest learning words in context rather than just memorizing lists.
Okay.
So, for example, instead of just memorizing the word opportunity on its own,
Right.
you might use it in a sentence that's relevant to you. Like, I am looking for an opportunity to practice speaking English.
I love that example.
Yeah.
Because it's so true.
Yeah, it's true for all of us.
It is.
Yeah.
And then, of course, flashcards can also be helpful just for testing yourself.
Right. And nowadays, there's so many digital flashcard apps.
Oh, yes.
Like Anki or Quizlet.
Right.
And you can make them, really fun and personalized.
Yes, completely. Okay.
Yeah.
So we've covered self-practice. We've covered vocabulary.
Yeah.
Now let's move on to finding language partners,
Okay.
which I know can feel kind of difficult when native speakers maybe aren't easy to find.
Yeah.
But this is where things get really interesting, because the guide really emphasizes that your language partners don't actually need to be native English speakers.
You don't. No.
Other learners are great practice partners too,
Mm-hmm.
since you're all learning together.
Yeah.
So that's encouraging.
Yeah, it is. It makes finding a partner so much easier.
It does.
Okay.
Okay. So how does the guide suggest finding these partners?
Well, one way is through language exchange platforms. So these are websites and apps that connect you with people who want to learn your native language
Oh, cool.
while you practice English.
So you're kind of helping each other.
Exactly. It's mutually beneficial.
I love that. And the guide mentions a few popular platforms that I think are worth checking out.
Yeah.
Tandem,
Okay.
HelloTalk,
Mm-hmm.
and Speaky.
Right. I've tried a few of those, and it's so interesting,
Yeah.
You get to meet people from all over the world. You can learn about different cultures while you're practicing your English.
It's like a cultural exchange as
Yeah,
well. Yeah, that's great. The guide also points out that online communities can be like a gold mine for finding practice partners.
They are. Yeah.
So what are we talking about here? Facebook groups dedicated to learning English?
Mm-hmm.
Or forums on Reddit like English Learning?
Right. Exactly.
I can see how those could be really helpful. What
Yeah.
about interacting on YouTube channels that are in English?
Yeah. Great way.
Leaving comments, you know?
Exactly. It's all about just surrounding yourself with English.
Yes.
Even if it's online.
Even if it's online.
You can also look for virtual language meetups, which are basically online events that are specifically for language practice.
I love that. And actually, the guide mentions a couple websites.
Yeah.
Meetup.com and conversationexchange.com
Mm-hmm.
as good places to find those. So I love that even if you don't have those native speakers, physically near you,
Right.
there are so many ways to connect with others
Yeah.
and practice.
Exactly. And a lot of people actually find it, they find it easier to practice online because they feel less shy or self-conscious.
Totally. Yeah, it takes the pressure off a little bit.
Yeah.
Speaking of support, what about when you don't even have a partner to practice with?
Right.
Like, what if you're just on your own?
Yeah.
The guide has this whole section on using technology
Oh, yeah.
to practice conversations.
That's a fun one.
I think it's a really good one.
Yeah.
So we already talked about voice assistants, right? Like Siri and Alexa.
Right.
Chatting with them is a really easy way to practice speaking without feeling too nervous, right?
Exactly. You don't have to worry about making mistakes in front of another person.
Exactly.
You can ask them about the weather, request a joke, or just chat about your day. It's very simple.
And if you're looking for something even more interactive, the guide suggests trying AI chatbots,
Yes.
which are basically programs that are specifically designed for conversation practice. And they can be really engaging. Some chatbots can even give you feedback on your English.
They can. I think that's pretty cool.
I do too. That's
Yeah.
really impressive.
Yeah.
The guide mentions Replica and Mitsuku as popular examples. Have you tried those?
I have. It's fascinating how they can adapt to your responses and just have these surprisingly natural conversations.
So it's like having this virtual conversation partner available 24/7,
Right.
anytime you want to practice.
Anytime you want to practice. Exactly.
Okay. So we've got self-practice, technology, finding those language partners online,
Yeah.
even if they're not native speakers. But the guide also talks about something that's easy to forget sometimes. And that is making English just a part of your daily routine.
Right.
So it's not just about having this special practice time. It's about finding ways to use it all the time. What are some of those ways?
Well, the guide actually gives some really simple but useful ideas, like watching things in English.
Oh, yeah. Movies, TV shows, all that.
Exactly. YouTube videos, podcasts, the news, anything that lets you hear how English is spoken naturally.
And we have so many options now.
We do.
With all the streaming services and things online, you can literally find anything that you're interested in.
Yeah.
Cooking shows, documentaries, videos about your hobbies.
Exactly. So it's a really fun way to learn while you're relaxing.
Totally. Yeah. And the guide also recommends writing in English as a way to kind of reinforce your grammar and vocabulary.
Yeah, because it makes you think about the words you're using, the structure of your sentences.
Exactly. So even something as simple as keeping a journal in English
Yeah.
could be helpful.
Could be very helpful. Exactly.
Okay. So we have a lot of good advice here from the guide. It seems like there's so many ways to practice and get better at English, even without a native speaker.
There are.
But what about if you're feeling stuck? Like
Yeah.
you're not making progress?
Yeah.
What then?
Well, I think that's where mindset comes in. So the guide has a whole section on building confidence. And it says that practicing alone, even though it sounds kind of counterintuitive, can actually make a big difference.
That makes sense, though.
Yeah,
It's like any skill, the more you practice, the better you get.
exactly. And the guide really emphasizes the importance of starting small.
Oh, wait.
So starting with just simple sentences and phrases. And as you get more comfortable, you can try harder things.
Yeah.
So it's not about trying to speak perfectly right away.
Right. It's about building up
It's about building up.
to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And the guide also reminds us to embrace mistakes,
Yes, very important.
which can be hard, I think.
It can.
But it says that mistakes aren't bad.
Yeah.
They're actually how we learn.
They are. It's so easy to get caught up in trying to be perfect. But I think what the guide is saying is that focusing on just speaking, even if you make mistakes,
Yeah.
is more important at first.
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
So it's about progress,
Yeah,
not perfection.
exactly. And the more you speak, the more confident you'll become.
Right. And I think that's a really encouraging message. It's okay.
Yeah.
Everyone makes mistakes.
It's part of the process.
It's part of the process.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of really great advice from this guide on how to improve our English fluency, even without relying on native speakers.
Yeah.
What are some of your key takeaways?
Well, for me, it's the importance of making English a daily habit. You know, finding those little ways throughout the day to use the language.
Yeah.
Whether it's talking to yourself, watching something in English, writing in a journal, all of those things.
I completely agree. It's about making English feel less like a chore
Yeah.
and more like a natural part of your life.
Yeah.
I also love how the guide really emphasizes that you don't need native speakers to improve.
You don't.
We can use technology, we can connect with other learners, and most importantly, we can practice on our own, which I think is really empowering.
It is.
Okay, well, we are going to explore even more ways to improve your English fluency
Yeah.
without native speakers when we come back. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Okay.
If you're enjoying this podcast, don't forget to like the video. Share it with friends who might find it helpful. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss our next video. Let us know in the comments what topic you'd like to hear.
And there's one more important area the guide covers that we haven't talked about yet, and that's pronunciation.
Oh, right. Yeah, that can be tricky, especially if you don't have a native speaker to kind of guide you, right?
It can be.
So what does the guide recommend?
Well, it suggests a few techniques that can help you improve your pronunciation even if you're practicing on your own. One of them is really listening carefully to how native speakers pronounce words and trying to imitate them.
That makes sense. But how can we do that if we don't have native speakers around us all the time?
Well, that's where technology comes in handy again.
Ah,
There are tons of resources online where you can listen to native speakers.
like what? Give me some examples.
You could find videos on YouTube where native speakers are explaining pronunciation concepts or showing you how to pronounce certain sounds. There are also websites and apps that are specifically for pronunciation practice.
Okay, that's helpful. Anything else?
Another technique is to record yourself speaking and then listening back to see where you could improve.
Oh, right. We talked about recording ourselves before as a way to practice speaking, but that makes sense for pronunciation too.
Exactly. So when you listen back, try to pay attention to which sounds you're having trouble with.
Okay.
And then you can focus on practicing those specific sounds.
I like that. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So it's really about active listening and paying attention and then practicing.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to just try different techniques and see what works for you.
Yeah. And the guide reminds us that even small improvements in pronunciation can make a big difference in how confident you feel about speaking.
They really can. It's a good reminder that we don't have to be perfect to communicate effectively.
Exactly. Yeah. And the more you practice, the more natural it becomes.
It does.
Okay, so we talked about self-practice, finding language partners, using technology, making English part of our lives, and now improving pronunciation. Is there anything else?
Well, there's one more essential part of learning a language, and that's listening comprehension.
Oh, right. Being able to understand what people are saying is just as important as being able to speak yourself.
It is, yeah. And the guide has some good advice for improving your listening comprehension skills, even if you don't have those native speakers to practice with.
Okay, I'm all ears. What does it say?
Well, one of the simplest things you can do is just expose yourself to as much English as possible.
Right, like we were talking about before, watching movies and TV shows in English.
Exactly. That's great because you can actually see people's facial expressions and body language.
Right, so you get extra clues to help you figure out what they're saying.
Exactly. But the guide also suggests listening to other types of content, like podcasts and audiobooks and news broadcasts.
Oh yeah, podcasts are great because there are so many topics. You can find something that you're actually interested in.
You can. And audiobooks are fantastic for just immersing yourself in a story and getting used to different accents and speaking styles.
Okay, that's a good point. But what if it's hard to understand everything you're hearing?
That's totally normal. And the guide suggests starting with easier content and then working your way up.
So, if you're a beginner, you might start with a podcast or an audiobook that's specifically for English language learners.
Right, because they often use simpler vocabulary and grammar, and they speak a little slower.
Okay. And then as you get better, you can gradually challenge yourself with something more difficult.
Exactly, like a podcast that's for native speakers.
Yeah.
The key is to find that balance between challenging yourself and not getting discouraged.
Right. And I think it's also important to make sure that you're enjoying what you're listening to.
Yeah.
Because if you don't like it, you're not going to stick with it.
Right. And listening comprehension is definitely a skill that you build over time with practice. So the more you listen, the easier it'll become.
That makes sense. So, okay, we talked about self-practice, finding language partners, technology, making English part of our lives, improving our pronunciation, now listening comprehension. Anything else?
Well, we need to talk about grammar.
Yes. Grammar. It can be a little intimidating.
It can be, but the guide really emphasizes that understanding those basic grammar rules is essential for speaking and writing English correctly.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But how can we learn grammar without feeling overwhelmed?
The guide suggests breaking it down into smaller chunks. So instead of trying to learn everything at once, just focus on one grammar concept at a time.
So, for example, you might start with learning about present simple tense, and then you can move on to present continuous.
Exactly. And there are tons of resources out there to help you learn grammar step by step.
Okay, like what?
Well, there are grammar books and websites that explain the rules really clearly. There are also apps and online courses that give you interactive exercises.
So many options.
Yeah.
But what if we make mistakes?
Mistakes, totally normal.
Yeah.
The important thing is to learn from them.
Right.
So when you make a mistake, try to understand why it was wrong and how you can correct it.
Okay. It's like turning mistakes into learning moments.
Exactly. And practice makes perfect, right?
Right.
The more you use those grammar rules in your speaking and writing, the more natural they'll become.
Okay. So we've covered self-practice, finding language partners, technology, making English a part of our lives, improving our pronunciation, listening comprehension, now mastering grammar. I think we covered it all.
We have covered a lot.
Yeah.
But there's one final and maybe the most important message that the guide emphasizes.
Oh, okay. What is it?
It's believing in yourself and your ability to learn English.
That's so important.
It is, because learning a new language can be challenging, but it's also really rewarding. So don't be afraid to make mistakes. Enjoy the journey. Celebrate your progress along the way.
That's a good point. It's about the process,
Yeah.
not just the end goal.
Exactly.
Okay, this has been such a good conversation. We've learned so much from this guide, how to improve fluency without a native speaker.
It's been great. Yeah.
But before we wrap up, let's take a moment to think about what we've learned and how we can apply these tips to our own language learning. What are your final thoughts?
I think for me, the biggest takeaway is that anyone can improve their fluency, even without native speakers around. It's all about finding what works for you and making English part of your life.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I'm actually feeling really inspired to try some of these things myself. I think I'm going to check out some of those language learning apps and see if I can find a language partner online.
Those are great goals.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think I'm going to challenge myself to watch more movies and TV shows in English.
Oh, nice.
And listen to more podcasts.
I like that.
I'm going to do it. And hey, remember, we're all in this together, right?
Sure.
There's this whole community of language learners out there who are supporting each other.
Yeah. Don't be afraid to reach out, ask questions, share your experiences.
So true.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this episode, I want to leave you with a question to think about.
Okay.
What is one thing you will try this week to boost your English fluency?
Yeah. Whether it's talking to yourself in English, trying out a language exchange platform, or simply embracing those mistakes. Just remember, every step you take brings you closer to your goal.
Exactly. And the journey is just as important as the destination, so enjoy it, celebrate your progress, never stop learning.
And we'll be back next week with another fascinating deep dive.
Yes, we will. Until then, happy learning.